Counting or not counting gang violence?
Oh my God. Go, run.
At Utah Valley University, a chaotic scene spread across social media. Screams, fleeing crowds, and a blood-stained stage-turned crime scene.
Oh my God.
Charlie Kirk, a prominent conservative figure and close ally of President Trump, was shot dead in front of over 3,000 students by a bullet from a building nearly 200 meters away. The President, Utah's governor, and many high-ranking leaders expressed their condolences for the immense loss. The students and people here could not hold back their tears before the shocking incident that just happened.
If anyone saw the shooting, if they would jump all over the guy, I saw nothing like that.
It was just a lot of love and joy and kindness, you know? And then the next person came up and it almost felt like a cue to me because they talked about transgender gun violence, and then as the guy said shooting or shooters or something like that, you just hear the gunshot and I'm sorry. You like...
However, as all eyes focused on the bullet just a few streets away, another crisis was gnawing at every corner, every life without a place to call home. What is Utah truly facing? And is the place once considered a peaceful fortress now cracking layer by layer? Widespread homelessness and poverty crisis. Utah was once seen as a symbol of stability in the western mountains, but now this very state has become the clearest expose of two conflicting layers, tightening their grip on America. A wave of ideological extremism and a humanitarian crisis right in the heart of the urban center. Homelessness is no longer a marginal issue. The latest data from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUDs, shows that the number of people without residence in the state has increased by nearly 20% in just 2 years. These tent cities, once considered temporary, have now become a permanent part of the urban landscape in Salt Lake City, Ogden, and Provo. These are not just lost lives. Many were once employed, had homes, and were full members of society. Veterans, teachers, administrative staff, and graduates burdened with student debt. The slip from a stable life sometimes doesn't come from a major upheaval, but just a few months of not being able to afford rent, an uninsured medical emergency, or a round of layoffs due to post-pandemic restructuring. It's noteworthy that while numerous cameras tracked every political development after Charlie Kirk's death, nearby invisible people continued to live and survive in silence. They have no podium, no forum to express themselves, and no time to debate policies. For them, a peaceful day simply means keeping their tent from being dismantled or finding a not-too-cold place to sleep at night. Poverty and homelessness don't strike like a disaster, but spread like a crack, slowly but deeply. If we continue to direct all our attention to the political stage without looking down at those left behind, then perhaps what society is losing is not just security, but the very connection between people.
That's not, so we can't finish? No, we're doing somewhere else. How long have you been out here?
Cleanup campaign or eradication. In recent years, the Utah government has intensified cleanup campaigns to remove homeless people from public areas, especially in Salt Lake City, where the sight of tent cities has become familiar. These campaigns are often referred to by local media with gentle names like camp clearings, urban sanitation, or reclaiming public spaces. However, for those involved, These raids are coercive cold and without alternative options. According to reports from human rights organizations and local health agencies, cleanup operations often take place in the early morning when many people are still asleep. Tents are confiscated or destroyed. Personal belongings from identification documents, medicines to blankets and pillows are discarded or go missing. Those who cannot react in time are pushed onto the streets with no alternative shelter. Although the government claims to give prior notice and provide information about temporary shelters, in reality, many people say they do not receive clear instructions, or the shelters are overcrowded, unsafe, or refuse admission due to health issues. Cleanup campaigns do not address the root causes of the problem. They merely push homeless people out of sight to other more secluded, darker, more dangerous areas. Some are forced to live in cars under bridges or hide in abandoned industrial areas. The feeling of being driven away and invisible to society becomes increasingly heavy, causing many to lose all faith in support systems. Socially, these campaigns exacerbate division. When residents see tents being dismantled, they might assume the problem has been solved. But in reality, it only makes the crisis sink deeper and creates the illusion that a heavy-handed solution can replace compassion and long-term action. For a community that once prided itself on humanity like Utah, this is not just a question of policy effectiveness, but a true moral test. Inadequate facilities and policies. Utah is not short on plans. On paper, programs like the Utah Homeless Services Reform Plan are implemented with hopeful promises, expanding shelters, improving healthcare services, enhancing community reintegration capabilities. But between brightly lit presentations and life on the streets, there's a gap not easily bridged. Budgets are approved, but they are insufficient to keep pace with the escalating crisis. In recent years, federal aid has been gradually cut, while post-COVID-19 inflation has driven up all costs, from rent food to healthcare. This puts local governments in a difficult position, lacking funds, lacking staff, and constantly facing pressure from residents concerned about urban image degradation. What is the consequence? Shelters become overcrowded. Many facilities cannot meet basic conditions such as bed security or minimal healthcare services. Some centers refuse to admit individuals with mental health issues or addictions, who ironically constitute a large proportion of the homeless community. And those who are admitted often have to sacrifice personal safety to have a place to sleep overnight. Meanwhile, building more affordable housing is not easy. Cumbersome legal processes, opposition from local residents, and concerns about property values lead to many projects being delayed or canceled. Even with political will, without community consensus and stable resources, everything remains on paper. And then, in that spiral, people themselves become the system's blind spot. A homeless child faces not only the cold at night, but also the potential for dropping out of school, malnutrition, and long-term psychological trauma. An adult losing their home not only loses a place to sleep, but also an address for job applications, health insurance, and sometimes even the feeling of belonging to this society. When plans are not fully realized, they not only waste budgets, but also erode trust. A society where trust is fractured cannot stand firm against any crisis, be it political or humanitarian. Invisible fear reigns without a roof over one's head. There's no door to lock at night. And that's when fear becomes clearer than ever. Homeless individuals not only battle hunger and cold, but also an invisible enemy. The feeling that they could be attacked at any moment by strangers, by the weather, or by the very social stigmas attached to them. A personal bag stolen in the night can mean losing all identification medication and the few remaining possessions needed to survive. An assault may never be reported because who will believe the word of someone with no fixed abode? Homeless women carry another layer of fear harassment assault, being seen as vulnerable shadows that no one will intervene for. Many have to disguise themselves as men, sleep sitting up, or dare not close their eyes for too long for fear of not waking up again. Shelters are supposed to be safe havens, but they are not always adequately staffed to ensure that. Some are overcrowded, while others do not admit people with mental health issues or addictions, who ironically make up the majority of this community. For children, fear often goes unspoken. It's the shame of not having clean clothes for school, the feeling of not belonging anywhere. It's dinner repeatedly consisting of a packet of raw instant noodles split into 3, and the insecurity of having to leave a sleeping spot because police demand they disperse. When policies cannot translate into safe shelter, the feeling of abandonment gradually seeps in, from individual psychology to community trust. A society where trust is eroded not only creates homeless people, but also creates citizens who live in fear, even if they have a home to return to. Indifference, the silent destroyer of community. When life is pushed to the edge of the sidewalk, where all that remains is a backpack and an old blanket. What people need is not just a place to sleep, but to be recognized as part of society. But sadly, in the eyes of many homeless people, are no longer individuals with their own stories, but rather urban nuisances. Problems to be tidied up rather than understood. This prejudice isn't just in the cold stare when passing a tent encampment. It lies in how the government responds, dismantling camps, increasing patrols, banning overnight sleeping in parks, solutions that address appearance rather than core issues. It's like trying to erase cracks on a wall without checking the foundation. Indifference, when repeated through policy and behavior, becomes a default mindset that homeless people are a consequence, not victims. This pushes them out of most serious conversations, no forum to speak, no voice to advocate, and not considered when designing the urban future. The result is a widespread chain of consequences, skyrocketing healthcare costs due to lack of early support, overwhelmed emergency services, dealing with after effects instead of prevention, and above all, a widening social gap. Not just between have and have not, but between belonging and being excluded. For wandering families, community silence can sometimes be more terrifying than weather or street violence. Children growing up in these conditions not only lack food and education, but also lack a sense of safety and trust in adults. These invisible wounds are what destroy the potential of a generation before it even has a chance to grow. In the broader picture of a society struggling with political division, violence, and instability, this indifference is the most dangerous catalyst, because it renders all efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, easily ineffective, simply for lacking one element, the recognition of the humanity of the vulnerable. Is the government healing or just hiding the wounds? In a society increasingly weary from instability and conflict, government response is no longer an option, but a test of trust. But after the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the spreading wave of insecurity, the question is not just, what will the government do to protect free speech, but also, what will they do with those living amidst that instability, but without a voice? Utah is not short on strategies. Programs like the Utah Homeless Services Reform Plan are drafted with professional language, promising sweeping reforms. But as we've seen, plans don't transform reality if budgets are still squeezed, if welfare models are pushed back behind urban image priorities. Instead of asking why people fall into homelessness, most policy responses focus on getting them out of sight. Campaigns to clean up sidewalks, dismantle encampments, and increase security in downtown areas are essentially forms of visual erasure, turning a social problem into a spatial management issue. That is not a solution. That is delaying a crisis. Some cities have tried different approaches, such as the housing first model, providing housing before requiring reintegration, or creating systems for accessing healthcare and mental health services directly within the community. But these efforts are still too small compared to the scale of the problem. And more importantly, they cannot succeed alone without a change in mindset throughout the entire administrative apparatus. As this nation is stretched by political extremes, the steadfastness of local governments in prioritizing people regardless of status will be the deciding factor in whether that society is healing or fracturing further. Freedom cannot be protected if we only protect a vocal few, and democracy cannot be spoken of when a segment of the population lives on the margins, both literally and figuratively. The choice is clear. The question is, will the government choose to face reality and act, or continue to cover up cracks with curtains named order? And flickers in the night. Beneath the gray dust of prejudice and systemic inertia, Utah still shows small lights from people who choose to act instead of standing still. While the government still weighs budgets against political priorities on the streets, civil society has begun to make a difference on its own. In an empty lot on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, a non-profit organization has built a tiny village of small houses, just about 15 square meters, enough to provide shelter from sun and rain enough for people to catch their breath. Not grand, not costing millions of dollars, but operated on trust that everyone deserves a place to call home. Religious groups from Christian churches to Islamic mosques have started organizing community dinners. On weekends, no ID required, no background checks. If you're hungry, you get to eat. Some student groups after Charlie Kirk's assassination launched the Don't Just Talk, Do Something initiative, donating blankets, books, gloves, and even providing temporary tutoring for children living in temporary shelters. In a small shelter in Provo, the coordinator is a woman who was homeless for 2 years with her 2 young children. Now she's the first to arrive and the last to leave each day, ensuring everyone gets breakfast medication and a bit of respect. No one understands their fear better than I do, she says, and no one understands the joy of being listened to. No one is under the illusion that these small acts of help are enough to change the entire situation. But they are proof that when the larger society is silent, the smaller society still speaks up. When the system is slow to change, people can still actively mend each other with the simplest actions. And sometimes it is precisely those small things, a roof, a warm meal, an unjudging glance, that became the true foundation for sustainable change, more so than any political statement. Because in the end, what sustains a community is not its budget, but the hearts of its people. What will Utah? Choose after the double shock. After a double shock, a gunshot on campus, and thousands of tents on sidewalks, Utah stands at a crossroads, not an easy choice. On one hand, there is pressure to tighten security, prevent extremism, and strengthen faith in institutions. On the other, an unsolved problem: thousands of people living on the margins, without homes, without care, without a voice. A state once lauded for its stability now faces the truth that stability cannot exist if it only lies in the hands of those who have homes to lock every night. If the government only focuses on security responses, building more fences, strictly controlling events, installing more cameras without simultaneously investing in people, then Utah will not escape the cycle of instability. Because it is the breakdown in social fabric that is fertile ground for hatred to take root. Extremism does not only come from those who carry guns. It can arise from people who feel abandoned for too long. Today's homeless may be victims, but if neglected long enough, their despair can turn into resistance. not because they are dangerous, but because they have nothing left to lose. In this context, social security needs to be redefined not just as protection from terrorism, but the ability to keep every individual in the community from falling into the abyss. A safe state is not just a place where there are no gunshots, but a place where people can sleep without fear of being evicted, can be sick without fear of bankruptcy, and can be poor without being ostracized. If Charlie Kirk's death is an alarm bell about polarization, then the homelessness crisis is a lingering reminder that societal cracks have existed before. They just weren't caught on camera. The question is no longer whether Utah has enough resources, but rather, does Utah have the courage to look at both wounds simultaneously and choose to heal instead of continuing to hide them? Because if not, today's silence will become tomorrow's price to pay. Utah is not only struggling with the pain of a gunshot, but also facing the relentless rise of homelessness, a clear sign of a fracture in the social fabric. Between the echoes of politics and the silence of poverty, Utah's choice now will not only shape a policy, but also reflect the deep nature of a community choosing confrontation or healing, choosing exclusion or understanding. A bullet can ignite fear, but indifference is what silently drags an entire society down. If you believe that every story, whether loud or silent, deserves to be heard, please like and subscribe to the NVL Travel Documentary channel.
Of course. There you go.